In the time it takes you to watch this intro, a standard airbase could be wiped off the map by a hypersonic missile. If your entire Air Force is parked in a row of hangars, you do not have an Air Force. You have a bonfire waiting to happen. The United States and China are spending trillions building fragile hangar queens, fighters that need air conditioning, pristine runways, and a team of 50 engineers just to turn on the engine. But Sweden looked at the end of the world and built a street fighter. This is the Saab Gripen E. It does not need a runway. It needs a highway. It does not need a base. It needs a forest. It is the rally car of fourth-generation warfare designed to hunt fifth-generation giants. Today on Airdom, we are breaking down the only jet that scares the superpowers, not because it is the biggest, but because it is the one they cannot catch. To understand the lethality of the Gripen, you must first understand the vulnerability of its rivals. In a modern peer-to-peer conflict, airfields are massive. Static targets. Satellites see them. Hypersonic missiles can reach them in minutes. If a country relies on a fleet of heavy fighters that can only operate from super bases with 3-kilometer runways, that country loses its air force the moment those runways are destroyed. The Gripen E eliminates this nightmare by rejecting the premise entirely. It does not need a base. It only needs a strip of asphalt, 800 meters long and 16 meters wide. This capability is known as Dispersed Operations, and for the Gripen, it is not an emergency backup plan. It is the primary doctrine. Picture a freezing winter morning in the high north. A highway normally used for civilian traffic has been cleared.
The launch window
A team of 6
open.
conscript technicians, led by a single professional officer, waits by the roadside with 2 trucks. They are not NASA engineers. They are young soldiers with specialized training. A Gripen E touches down, braking hard on the icy road. Within 10 minutes, less time than it takes to get a coffee in a busy terminal, the aircraft is refueled, rearmed with Meteor air-to-air missiles, and subjected to a full systems check. The engine roars to life, the afterburner lights up the gray sky, and the jet is airborne again. By the time an enemy satellite passes overhead to scan the area, the road is empty. The birds have flown. This is a logistical shell game that makes targeting the Swedish Air Force nearly impossible. You cannot kill what you cannot find, and you cannot find an Air Force that treats every country road as a launch pad. While the agility on the ground is revolutionary, the capabilities in the air are what terrify the opposition. The Gripen E is frequently underestimated because of its size. Critics look at its single engine, the reliable General Electric F-414, and assume it lacks the raw kinetic energy of a twin-engine beast like the Su-35 or the F-15. But this analysis misses the point of modern combat. In the 21st century, the pilot who shoots first wins, and shooting first is a function of information dominance, not horsepower. If the F-35 is a sniper, the Gripen E is a ghost. Its survival relies on the Arexis electronic warfare suite, and frankly, this system is unfair. Most fighters carry jamming pods like heavy luggage under their wings. The Gripen? The entire plane is the sensor. It utilizes gallium nitride technology, the high-end stuff, to act as an electronic ventriloquist. Imagine you are a Russian radar operator. You see a formation of 4 NATO jets approaching. You lock on. You fire, but your missiles fly harmlessly into empty space. Why? Because the jets were not there. The Gripen was 20 miles to the left, projecting a digital phantom to your radar, while hiding its true location in the noise. It does not just jam enemy radar, it gaslights it. In the modern battle space, the Gripen does not need to be invisible to the eye. It just needs to be invisible to the math. Inside the cockpit, the Gripen E solves the pilot's biggest problem: information overload. In a standard dogfight, a human brain can process about 4 variables before it starts to panic. The Gripen utilizes a human-machine interface powered by advanced AI algorithms to filter out the noise. It does not just show you a radar return. It tells you the threat level, the enemy's likely flight path, and the exact moment to fire. This is not just a big screen. It is decision superiority. While an F-35 pilot is busy managing sensors, the Gripen pilot is playing 4-dimensional chess. The jet handles the math. The pilot handles the engagement. This constitutes a wolf pack mentality. One Gripen might be a light fighter, but 4 networked Gripens act as a distributed supercomputer, sharing targets and coordinating strikes with a telepathic speed that heavier, non-networked jets cannot match. But before we reveal the single financial statistic that makes the F-35 look like a mistake, we have to look at the cheat code hidden in the Gripen's cockpit. Being able to land on a highway means nothing if you cannot afford to fly the jet. And this is where the Gripen E embarrasses established Western defense doctrines. Here is the statistic that changes everything. In the world of fighter jets, the cost per flight hour is the only number that matters. An F-35 Lightning II costs roughly $36,000 to $42,000 for every hour it spends in the sky. It is a flying bank vault. The Gripen E costs approximately $4,700 per flight hour. You can fly 7 Gripens for the cost of a single F-35. In a war of attrition, quantity has a quality all its own. While the enemy is grounding their fleet to save budget, Sweden can keep a 24/7 combat air patrol over the Baltic. The Gripen proves that you do not need to bankrupt your national economy to secure your airspace. Saab achieved this by separating the flight critical code, the stuff that keeps the plane flying, from the mission critical code, the stuff that shoots weapons. This sounds technical, but it is actually a tactical cheat code. It means engineers can update the Gripen's radar or add a new missile app in days, not years, without having to recertify the safety of the whole plane. While the enemy is waiting for a firmware update from headquarters, the Gripen has already downloaded the counter tactic and is back in the air. In a long war, you do not win with the best hardware. You win with the fastest evolution. This brings us to the geopolitical shockwaves this aircraft is generating. The decision by nations like Brazil to adopt the Gripen E is not merely a procurement choice. It is a declaration of independence. For decades, buying a fighter jet meant entering a marriage with a superpower. If you bought American, you relied on Washington for parts, codes, and permission to use the weapons. If you bought Russian, you tied your defense infrastructure to Moscow. The Gripen offers a third way: sovereignty. Brazil needed a fighter that could patrol the vast Amazon, operate from austere strips, and integrate with their own national industry. They did not want a black box they were forbidden to open. Saab offered technology transfer, allowing Brazilian engineers to understand, build, and modify the system. This effectively breaks the monopoly of the superpowers. It signals to the world that you do not need to bow to the geopolitical giants to secure your skies. You can have world-class avionics, lethal beyond visual range air-to-air missile capabilities, and superior electronic warfare, all without signing away your strategic autonomy. Let us construct a theoretical engagement to illustrate the Gripen's devil's advocate advantage. Picture a scenario in the Baltic Sea. Tensions are high. A heavy, thrust-vectoring fighter from a hostile power, let us call it the Su-57 Felon, crosses into contested airspace. The Felon is a monster of kinematics. It can turn on a dime, fly vertically, and carry a massive payload. But it is loud, hot, and shines like a beacon on thermal sensors. The Gripen E pilot, flying low over the waves, does not engage in a turning dogfight. That would be a guaranteed one-way ticket to the ground. Instead, the Gripen remains silent, its radar off to avoid detection. It relies on its infrared search and track sensor, a passive eye that looks for heat. The sensor spots the massive engines of the enemy fighter from 100 kilometers away. The Gripen pilot stays below the radar horizon, utilizing the clutter of the waves to mask their approach. Through the encrypted data link, the pilot receives targeting coordinates from a friendly naval corvette miles away. The Gripen launches a Meteor ramjet missile. This weapon is unique. Unlike standard solid fuel rockets that burn out after a few seconds, the Meteor breathes air, allowing it to throttle its engine and maintain high energy all the way to the target. The enemy pilot gets a warning only when the missile's active seeker turns on in the terminal phase. It is too late. The kinetic monster is swatted out of the sky by a silent assassin that never even turned on its main radar. The Gripen banks away, diving back toward the protection of the Swedish archipelago, ready to land on a remote road, reload, and disappear again. This is the paradigm shift. The era of the do-it-all heavyweight champion is facing a crisis of relevance. The Gripen E argues that, in the future, the survivor will not be the strongest, but the most adaptable. It is a system designed for the defensive guerrilla war of the air. It acknowledges the reality that in a war against a superpower, you will be targeted, your bases will be hit, and your communications will be jammed. The Gripen is built to thrive in that chaos, not just endure it. Sweden has effectively proven that innovation is not a function of budget size, but of necessity. By focusing on the specific constraints of their geography and the specific threats of their neighborhood, they have produced an aircraft that punches well above its weight class. It challenges the assumption that only the United States or China can define the cutting edge of military aviation. The Gripen E stands as a testament to the power of focused engineering. It is not the fastest jet in the sky. It is not the stealthiest, but it might just be the smartest. And in a game of high-stakes aerial chess, where one wrong move means total annihilation, intelligence is the ultimate weapon. The myth that you need to be a superpower to dominate the air has been shattered, not by a massive fleet of bombers, but by a single-engine fighter that breathes ice-cold air and hides its heat signature like a needle in a haystack. So, the next time you hear about the massive defense contracts and the trillion-dollar programs, ask yourself, would you rather have a hangar full of Ferraris that cannot leave the garage because the driveway is broken, or a fleet of rally cars that can race through the woods and win the war while the enemy is still looking for a parking spot? If you enjoyed this deep dive into the strategic philosophy of the Gripen E and want to see more analysis on how asymmetric warfare is changing the skies, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to AirDom. We decode the strategy so you can understand the stakes.